sales is the most lucrative skill in the world, period. The problem is most sales advice out there today is outdated, cheesy, and can even keep you from getting the deals that can make all the difference in your career. This is the No BS Sales School, a podcast for entrepreneurs and salespeople who want to master the skill of selling without all the BS. Listen, if you're like me, you hate doing admin crap. Number one, because you're not good at it. And number two, because you know it's taking you away from the stuff that actually makes you money. So why are you doing it? Do what I did. Go to worksby.com right now and let them pair you with a real executive assistant. Once I started working with Cheryl at Worksby, my income went up 40% in 1 month, and my working hours went from 70 down to 40. It's a game changer. Go to worksby.com right now, book a call, and tell them Walker sent you. If you do, you'll get 2 extra hours of service for free as a bonus. So if you're ready to finally stop doing the stuff you hate and focus on the stuff that makes you money, go to worksby.com right now. That's WORXBEE.com. Tell them Walker sent you, and you'll get those 2 free hours. Welcome to the OBS Sales School podcast. I'm your host, Walker McKay. Those of you that listen to me, work with me, know that I don't like BS. And there's a lot of BS that goes on in the world. And among the things that I admire are people who've become successful who are willing to share some of the struggles, right? To share some of the stuff that's been hard for them. And that overnight success is bullshit, right? It happens often after years of struggle. I know there are tech bros who have overnight success after 2 months. Well, this ain't about them or for them. So today, I want to introduce to you my guest, Derek Anderson, who's a friend of mine. We've become friends. And Derek, among other things, is a coach. He's a Vistage coach. He also does EOS. He's a business owner. He's a former Catholic priest. He's a hostage negotiator. Derek is an amazing guy, very smart, with a lot of things to share. He's a high achiever who, believe it or not, has had to make some pretty tough decisions. So I want to hear about those. So Derek Anderson, welcome to the show. So glad you're here.
Thank you, Walker. Great to be here with you today.
Derek, you've had quite an interesting, kind of blew me away when I found out about your past and how you got to where you are today, being a coach and that kind of stuff. Do you mind taking 2 or 3 minutes and just kind of share with us your journey? Just hit me the highlights.
Sure. It's quite interesting for me too. I never anticipated this path in my life, but
right.
It's also kind of part and parcel to who I am and just how I was created. So, ever since I was a kid, my mom used to always say, "You will never be happy until you're going Mach 3 with your hair on fire." I mean, that was me as a young lad there. And from a young age, I always wanted to excel. I set goals. I started karate in 3rd or 4th grade, and as a 3rd or 4th grader, I had an ironclad will and determination to accomplish 2 things. I said, I will get my black belt and I will never fail a test on that path to get a black belt. So
wow.
Lo and behold, in high school, that I ended up achieving that. But that's just kind of who I was. And as I was growing up, I was just so fascinated and amazed by the world around me and the people that I met. And I was just so excited to really embrace with both hands the adventure of life. So that's kind of taken me down, as you mentioned, several different paths. And, for a long time, I realized that I think just the way that I was built, there's a drive for excellence, and that there would be nothing else on earth that could really satisfy me than to become a Navy SEAL. So I think really that caught my attention somewhere in the process of doing karate. And
so how old were you when you kind of put your eyes on Navy SEAL?
I would say probably 5th or 6th grade.
Okay. So you're all the way 11 or 12 at that point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I just started, that gave greater determination to get my black belt, hand-to-hand combat, tactics. And I have the knack to think with both ends or sides of my brain, both strategically and tactically.
Yep.
And so I loved all of those things. I love the concept of a tight-knit brotherhood and being part of something greater than myself. So I became a certified scuba diver in high school. Couldn't wait till I turned 18 to start jumping out of planes. And I was just doing everything that I could to go down that route. My parents became more involved in their faith when I was in high school, and we grew up Catholic, and they started praying on a daily basis, and so my life started changing as I started praying and just developing my own, for the first time realizing that it's possible to have a personal relationship with God. He's a personal God who knows us personally. So I started opening my heart to him, and I just realized he started having a higher calling in life. And so there was a change in high school, and I thought, you know what, this higher calling, I must be called to be a professional golfer. That's what God wants from me.
So you went from, the world is so interesting, it's so interesting people, I'm going to go out and kill them, to, hey, I'm going to go play golf with them now.
Correct. Yeah. And I thought, hey, I don't have to worry about killing people along the way. So
yeah.
And unless there's some extreme, errant tee off shot.
Exactly.
But, I was a 2 handicap golfer in high school and captain of the golf team. So I thought, hey, maybe I got a shot at this. And anyways, took that into college. My dad always said, hey, find what you're passionate about and follow that path. And your mom and I will always support you as long as it's not illegal, as long as it's not displeasing to God. We'll always have your back. So off to college I went. I was fascinated by philosophy and theology and studying scripture and all of that. So in college, I really felt that God was, this is a much longer story, but I really felt and came to the conclusion that God was calling me to be a missionary and to be a Catholic priest. And so that was the next path that I set out on. Mm-hmm. And did that for 17, 20 years. And, as he had mentioned, went through different levels there and got ordained.
Let me stop for a second. And because this is the important part to me is you didn't just go become a missionary and a Catholic priest. You worked your way up through 7 levels or something to become, tell a quick version of the steps that you went through to get, where you worked your way up to.
Sure. So I jumped out of college going into my senior year and went down to Belize and Guatemala. I lived on the border of Belize and Guatemala, serving in a mission at a poor Catholic high school that had been really established for the poor and those who failed the national exam that allowed you to go on to high school. Yeah. So really kind of the poorest of the poor. And I loved it. I did a spiritual year formation in the deserts of New Mexico with a great group of guys. Then from there, I was sent off to Rome. So I did further theology, deep theology, and got a couple more degrees there. I was assigned to a parish in the Diocese of Rome. So I learned to speak Italian fluently and loved that experience. Was then assigned as the academic dean of our House of Studies for future seminarians, so guys that are studying to become priests. And
this is still in Rome.
This is still in Rome. And then I was tapped for a position in Northern Jersey. So 2011 ended up being assigned to Northern Jersey in a unique place that was an evangelization center, really reaching out to those that had fallen away from the church, unaffiliated, whatever it might be, and doing essentially creative outside the box outreach to really connect with people first and foremost where they were at. Simultaneously of doing that, I was also the executive director of the office, what's called the Office of Catechesis. So I oversaw religious education for 110 churches across northern New Jersey. And it was a dead office when I stepped into it. So really just went about building the right team, getting the right people, and using the resources that I had, which were minimal, to really kind of build something that's even remained to today. And then the last step in that process was, as we say, no good job goes unpunished. So I was assigned as a pastor of a parish, and it was rather dead. And so I set about the same way that I transformed that office that I was the director of, I set that same approach to the parish. So we grew the parish 100% in the first 2 years.
You went
and
from 2 to 4 people.
Yeah, that's right. 2 to 4 people is amazing, including me when coming on board, of course. So, yeah, we had a 1,800 member parish, and I loved it. I loved what I was doing. I loved the people. They're just to this day a part of my heart, and I'll never forget them. So that's been fantastic. But I really kind of hit a point too where the pain that had been growing within me for the past 20 years was kind of hitting a breaking point. So, and maybe that's a discussion for later on.
Yes. So you reach this pain and you realize the time for me to stay in the Catholic Church, I need to move on from here, right? And this was
right. I just as a qualification, I'm very active Catholic in my parish and everything. Yes, I never left the Catholic Church. I left active ministry.
Thank you.
And essentially because of the obligation for priestly celibacy or not being married and being able to have a family. And there's that could be a whole other podcast.
Absolutely, it can be. Yeah. And we'll go back to that in just a minute. But so what happened next? So you went through a lot of torment and worry and figuring out how the world and praying and how do I do this?
Right.
And then what?
Well, I can go into the story a little bit, if you want to jump in now or a little bit later on, but
let's do this. You're right. Let me dig into some questions here. Yeah, let me give some questions here. So,
sure.
Do you think, this innate drive in you, is it innate? Where'd that come from?
I have no idea, but it's somehow just interwoven into my DNA.
It's who you are, right?
Yeah, it's part of who I am.
That's a talent that you are given. And that has risen with you in the ranks. It's interesting, your focus, that you have gone all in on so many things. What causes you to do that?
Well, I believe in total commitment. So when I've actually determined, hey, this is the path that God has, for me, then I want to be, if that's his plan, I want to be all in on his plan. And basically that comes, I think, from a conviction that when I was a teenager and started praying, that I realized if all I did was my own will throughout life, I was going to be miserable. Mm-hmm. And that happiness really, it kind of begins to filter in when our lives change direction from going inward to going outward, and being open to God and open to his plan, and realizing that all he wants for us is happiness. And happiness can be it can be a loaded word.
There's different people. Yeah. But listen to some podcasts.
I'm happy when I eat chocolate ice cream. But on that soul level of happiness, and fulfillment, realizing I'm doing somebody else's will and not just my own.
All right. So, and this is something that I think probably his debates have been going on for centuries. And so many people struggle with that. How do I know? How do I know? And they're looking for some sort of certainty. And my guess is that while even though you have a strong faith and you pray and you're waiting for God's direction, certainly you've had some uncertainty, oh shit, I'm getting ready to do this. How do you know?
Yeah.
How can you tell it's God's will versus you're just taking the wrong path?
That's a great question. I think it comes down to solid discernment. And there's some really good, just sound, both biblical and church, principles. The principles of the church's discernment come from Scripture. So I would say, first and foremost, just putting it completely before God. This is how I do it.
Yeah.
There's a decision that has to be made. I just open my heart. I put it completely before God. I tell him exactly what I would prefer. And then
God laughs. And then God laughs.
He has a good chuckle and he's like, okay. And then I really leave it. I leave it there. And as I've grown older and had more experience in life, I've started to find that a lot of the answers they're not They're not dropping down from the clouds.
Right.
And so many times we wait for the clouds to part and there to be this, beam of light and a clear direction. And that's not the normal way. God can do that, of course, but that's not the normal way that he does it. He's surrounded us with the answers.
So it's interesting. I tell this story. And have you ever seen the movie Scarface?
I have not. No.
Well, I have seen the movie.
I'm familiar
Scarface.
with it, but yeah.
Well, Scarface to me was an amazing movie, and I don't like violent movies like this anymore. But one of the things, Tony Montana, who is this cocaine dealer who has built this gigantic empire, and he is at the height of his empire, right before everything goes to shit. And he walks out on the back balcony of this huge mansion, and there's a party going on. There are people there, and it's all this fancy stuff. And he looks up in the sky, and there's a blimp. I don't know if it's the Goodyear blimp. Maybe it's the Transamerica. Did Transamerica ever blimp? Anyway, on the bottom, maybe Goodyear wouldn't license their name. Maybe they made a Transamerica. But there was one of those, a scrolling sign on the bottom, one of those lights like you see up on a movie venue. And it said, "The world is yours. Fly." Maybe it's Pan America, something like that. The world is yours. And Tony Montana took that as a sign. I tell people, very rarely will you get a sign that says, "Hey, you're doing the right thing," right? I think Tony Montana ended, it didn't end well for him. So maybe that was another lesson there in the same part, but it's often not a come to Jesus burning bush moment. It's led a direction and how, right? Is that right?
That's correct. I'd say just in summary form, either number one, interiorly, there's, you really kind of said it, number one, objectively, this is how I do it, of course. Set it up according to the norms of discipleship that are really there in the parameters. And then I move, there's freedom to move within that. That's number one. So on the objective piece outside of myself. And then number two, if it's not so much it's not a moral issue, but it's like, which good direction should I go?
Which way? Yeah.
I look for that interior peace and lack of disturbance. And then number two, if there is not any kind of interior disturbance, that also is a sign. So there might not be something positive that says, "Hey, go this route." But when I put it before God and there's no interior obstacle or disturbance that's coming up, that's another way that God actually confirms decisions.
So I hear
a lot of people don't know that part.
Well, I hear you, but surely when you're making some of these decisions, there's fear, and surely there are, there's stuff you're like, I hope this is right. I'm trusting in you. Holy shit. So tell me, because you've had several moves like that. Tell me how does that play in?
Yeah. That is the epitome of our state when there are no obstacles coming up within the soul, and there's no there's nothing, no block saying, "Hey, don't do this, don't go this route." When that happens, and we're still waiting for the sign, we're waiting for God to act according to our norms and what
our time frame.
Yeah, our time frame, how we want it communicated, and he doesn't operate like that. Then all of that fear comes in, and it's like, oh crap, now I know that there's no obstacles, and I've got to take the initiative. I've got to do this, and that's where all the fear comes in, all the doubts, all the questions, and then you start down that path, and you're kind of like, now am I just making this up, or So it's helpful to reflect back and review how you came to the decision, that it was a solid decision, it was well discerned. And the other thing I do is I run it by other people that I really trust. So having that outside objective perspective is critical. So it's not just, me in my own head.
Also, one of the things I tell people about decision making, and I don't know, I think you probably agree with me. If you make a decision to make a change, whatever that would be, and you figure out some period of time later that you made a decision that is no longer an optimal decision.
Right.
You make another decision to get out.
Right.
To change, right? And perhaps that's part of the divining process as well, that you realize that, every decision you make it, I believe in a lot of cases, they're illegal and they're immoral decisions, but I think making most decisions, it just takes us down a different rich path. I'm not so sure there's good and there's bad necessarily. I know there are.
Not every decision's a moral decision. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not black and white. And so we make a decision that'll take us down a one rich path one way. If we went the other way, it takes us down a different rich path. And so, and if you don't like the way things are going, you make a decision to change, like we do every single day. How do you deal with? So you clearly have had lots of, fear, anxiety, and doubt, which you blanket over with your strong faith. How do you, when you wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes you go, holy shit, what am I doing?
Yeah, sure.
What do you tell yourself? What do you tell yourself when you're doing that though? What do you tell yourself in your brain when you're freaking panicking?
Well, it is about a mindset. And like I said, taking those decisions and taking sound steps to ensure that I'm making the best decision I can make at the given time with the means that I have available to me. I reflect back onto that moment and I said, I did the best that I could at this point. And I didn't have the knowledge or the experience that I have now back then. So, you have to give yourself a pass. You can't beat yourself up. You got to be humble about it and say, yeah, you know what? I'm here. This is where I'm at. Now what? Now these are the cards that I have to play with, and I move forward. So it's the key then is to really face your fears, to place your trust in God, as I would say, and to take steps to move forward. So life is not clear, and as you get older, it's more and more of a mystery. Unseen things come your way, and you have to adapt. And when you're in your 20s, it's a very different picture. You have a very different worldview. It's very, answers are very clear, and everything's right in front of you. And it's,
you got it
completely
figured out.
Clear. You got that all figured out. You just got to tell everybody in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, 80s, and 90s how to do it.
One of my favorite New Yorker cartoons is a picture.
Sorry to cut you off. I'm just saying that because that's a self-conviction of me and my 20s.
Oh shit, me too. So one of my favorite New Yorker cartoons is two 20-somethings sitting at a coffee table and they're laughing, a table in a coffee shop laughing, and it says 20-somethings who realize they've figured the whole fucking world out. Good for you. Good luck.
That was me throughout my teens, 20s, and probably a good chunk of my 30s too. So
yeah, we've all been there. It's so much better. My 18-year-old now, he doesn't need to go to college. He already knows everything. What in the hell, right? And from his experience. So what's been the thing that has, what's the decision that you made that you thought was one that was the right decision, that you realized afterwards, I may have been following my own path instead of something God set up for me? What's the decision? And tell me about it.
Well, the biggest one for me was, the conviction that I was called to be a Catholic priest. Hands down, the largest, life decision that I made. And there's more of a background to this that, throughout college, especially in the first couple of years of college, I had a lot of people telling me, you're called to be a Catholic priest, and, just kind of suck it up and accept the fact that God's calling you. So, and me with just my immaturity and all in attitude that just kind of carried over. I just knelt down and I told the Lord, I'm like, I will never say no to you. And so the hell if I'm going to start now. And so I say yes. And I give you that, and that's a final yes. So I said that when I was 19 years old. And I never questioned it. In fact, any thought or any suggestion from the outside to even question whether it was accurate or a good decision or the right decision for me, I just blew it off as really as a temptation. And, I'd get pretty upset with anybody who brought that up.
But so let's talk about this though. So, what do you believe at this point that it was not God calling you to become a priest?
Yeah.
You not believe, see, you better than me, but I would say to someone in your position, I would say, maybe you were called to be a priest and then you were called away from that.
Yeah. that wouldn't be necessarily the Catholic perspective, because
Of course.
you're going in, you do go all in, and
I'm an Episcopalian, so we change it all the
approach.
time. So I get it. Yeah. So
that I mean, that's you commit to it, and
Yep.
Unless you have some kind of valid reason for stepping out of it, then that you stay committed to it. So
how scary was it, if that's the case, to be able to say, I was just kidding, I was wrong? I mean, that had to tell your boss, if you will, and your congregation. I mean, that had to be a huge, scary thing.
It was terrifying. The most terrifying thing I ever did was the interior work prior to that. I'd say that was the second most terrifying thing, was making that public and announcing it. But the most terrifying thing that I ever did was, I ended up I had a confessor. So as a Catholic, you go and confess your sins to a priest. Even as a priest, you go and confess your sins to a priest. So who I had for years, he had known me for many years. And I later found out that he was also a psychologist. So I would bring stuff to him, outside of the context of confession. I'd just simply say, I'm having these thoughts. So he was the one who really said, to be honest with you, you're exhibiting signs of some form of repression. I was like, oh crap.
Oh shit, here we go down this. Oh no, not me too.
You're like, hey, was I abused as a kid and blacked out those memories? All these crazy stuff, all things go through your mind. And it's just, for 3 days, I avoided it. And I went back, I'd pass by the church, inside the rectory where I lived, we had a chapel. I passed by the chapel, I kind of popped in like, hey, Lord, too busy, gotta go. Okay, bye.
Hey.
So, that was I was just too terrified. And finally, I actually knelt down and I just prayed. And I was terrified for so many reasons. Number one, I didn't know what was with him. I didn't know what it was. I was never really familiar with repression per se. Then number two, I didn't know what it was going to look like when it came up, and I didn't know or could control any of that. And then number three, I had no idea where it was going to lead me.
Yeah, you're opening a huge can of worms. Once you open that shit up, you can't close that, but you can't close it again.
Exactly. Yeah. So I, at the end of my prayer there, I just surrendered, and I said, Lord, all I pray is that this is not displeasing to you. Number one, I know you want us to be whole on the human level. So, you don't want us to repress things. So, I give you permission. I give myself permission. I give whatever permission I need to give, I give it. And so for the next 40, 45 days, probably had a list, or over the next 4 weeks or so, 4 or 5 weeks, had a list of about 40 or 45 bullet points and they weren't really memories. Number one, there was no abuse. Just follow that up with, in case people are interested in. It was just memories that I had that I was cognizant of, but had never connected the dots with. I never reflected on them. And so there was a lot of insight. And I kind of got to the point where I realized that this was never a good fit. Like the life, while I enjoyed what I was doing as a priest and enjoyed working with the people that I was working with, the type of the style of life was not a good fit for me. And some guys, it's a fantastic fit, and they're flourishing. And but for me, that wasn't the case. And it was kind of, grin and bear it. When this
is going to work out, everything's hard, God's with me on this, and you say those things to yourself, right?
And I look back, and I had this pivotal conversation when I first started seminary. It was hell. I had a 4-hour commute every day and not enough food, heat, and it was bad. 23 of us in a building made for 6, so it was really bad. And it was kicking my butt. And one of the other guys that was in the seminary with me, he said, hey, let's go for a walk. He was a retired special force operator, Army. And he said, hey, I know that you want to become a SEAL and all of this, but this is like, treat this like buds, treat this like boot camp. If you're going to survive, you can't look left or right. Don't think about what's behind you. Don't look too far ahead. Just do the task in front of you. And when you're done with that, do the next one. When you're done with that, do the next one. He says, you got to flip that switch. Otherwise, you're not going to survive. So I did, and went into survival mode. But the problem is I never flipped the switch off.
Right.
You can't live in survival mode. That's
right.
So
not for long.
Not for long. I mean, I did it for a long time, but
well,
it usually does not end well. Luckily,
right.
I had to face the fears, and it was, it was crushing. But
so tell me something. What give the No BS sales team a couple of pieces of advice. What's something that, going through what you've gone through, what would you tell somebody else who is struggling with a decision or is a big life altering thing and they're trying to figure it out? What kind of advice would you give them? Going from where you've come from?
Well, number one, sometimes our fear is the thing that we fear the most.
Right.
And when you actually face it down and you pass, you don't go around it, you go through it. And when you go through it, it's hell. But you know what? It's you look back and you say, it would be more of a hell to have not gone through this. Mm-hmm. And I'm standing on the other side of this now. It was hell on so many different fronts. It was terrifying on so many different fronts, internal, external, you name it. But, I've never been so happy or content with life ever. I've never had this level of contentment or happiness. So, and I knew I was making the right decision, and the decisions I had made in the past were not the right decisions. And there was a clear path that, the Catholic Church had set up for me to request, the dispensation to be able to step away, for valid reasons. So,
anyway, I know that you strongly believe that you made the wrong choice to go into the priesthood. Whether you did or not, I don't know, but I would tell you that making that decision, right, led you to the path where you are today. And had you not, correct, I don't know that you would have gone a different path, right? So, but anyway, tell me something then. How would somebody, you're in Columbia, South Carolina, yep, you're a Vistage leader, you're an EOS implementer. How would somebody find you if they wanted to talk to you or see if you could help them with their business?
Well, the best way to really reach me for either of those is, just drop me a line over email there. So it'd be my name, Derek, DEREK, .Anderson, ANDERSON. And then my company's name is Avanti Leadership. So it's Avanti, AVANTI-leadership.com.
Okay. So if you want to reach Derek, Derek.Anderson at Avanti-leadership.com. Derek, thank you so much for being on the show. It's I'm always fascinated by the paths that people take and how they make decisions. What I've loved is that you didn't make a single damn excuse, right? Yeah. You've faced all this yourself. You've internalized that this is what's happened. This is where I am. And from here we move forward. And I think that's a huge deal. And I think that's kind of who you are, right?
And thank you. And it is, and it's what I want to be able to provide other CEOs and business leaders, because you transfer that over to the business realm. What conversation are you terrified to have with one of your employees? Who's the toxic employee who's performing well, but is killing the culture? Ugh. What are those tough decisions you're afraid to make and keep putting off and procrastinating? So we have these fears, even on the business level, in addition to the personal level, that when we start to face them and move through them, that's the good news that I'm bringing is there's hope, and there's a lot more waiting for you. And so that's really what I'm in the business of, is helping people experience that transformation with whatever tool they need, whether it's a Vistage group or helping them and their leadership teams through EOS. Right now I'm really focused on the Vistage group piece of it, launching here in Columbia. So I'm just trying to connect with CEO leaders who are growth minded, who are not satisfied with mediocrity, they desire to excel, that are open, honest, vulnerable, and to give them hope and say, yeah, there is hope out there for you. So
Awesome.
love to explore that.
Hey, Derek, thank you so much for being a part of the show. No BS Sales Team, I hope you listened and picked up some tips from this, some things that you're going to go doing forward. How about do me a favor, but drop me a line, walker@walkermckay.com. If you want to copy Derek Anderson, that'd be great. Or even better, go to LinkedIn and post what you learned today with a link to this podcast. Put in the comments what it was you learned. Let's share this with other people who need to hear it. Thank you so much, Derek. Thank you for being on the
Walker,
show. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate your listeners.
Talk soon.
Take care.